Remember that moment? The one where your partner said something so innocent, so small, maybe just a casual, "we need to talk," or "why are you being so quiet?" And suddenly you weren't yourself anymore. Your heart raced, your thoughts spiraled. And before you knew what was happening, you were either in the middle of a fight you didn't see coming, or you completely shut down, unable to explain why. In the aftermath, that haunting question, why did I react like that? Maybe you've apologized more times than you can count. I don't know what came over me. Maybe you've promised yourself it wouldn't happen again. Yet somehow, it always does, that same overwhelming wave of emotion that seems completely out of proportion to whatever just happened. And the most confusing part, it's often with the person you care about most, the one you want to connect with, the one whose opinion actually matters to you. If I love them, why do they trigger me so intensely? What if I told you that your triggers aren't random accidents or signs that you're with the wrong person? What if these intense emotional reactions are actually a map-precise coordinates, pointing directly to the wounds you've carried long before this relationship began? Today, we're going to decode why certain words, tones, or expressions from your partner can instantly transport you to an emotional state that feels overwhelming and out of control. Because when you understand what's really happening in these moments, everything changes. The person you thought was causing your pain becomes the unlikely doorway to your deepest healing. First, let's understand what's actually happening when you get triggered. Because it's far more complex and far more revealing than most people realize. When you're triggered, you're not just having a bad reaction or being too sensitive. Your nervous system is actually activating a survival response to perceived danger it remembers from long ago, even if your conscious mind doesn't. Think about Alex, who found himself becoming irrationally angry whenever his girlfriend would ask where he'd been. On the surface, it seemed like a simple question, but something about her tone or facial expression would send him into a defensive spiral. "I'm not a child," he'd snap, the intensity of his reaction surprising even himself. What was actually happening? Alex's nervous system wasn't responding to his girlfriend in the present moment. It was responding to his father's interrogations from 20 years ago, the way his dad would question his whereabouts with suspicion and judgment, making him feel constantly monitored and never trusted. His girlfriend wasn't his father. But in that moment, his body couldn't tell the difference. This is what psychologists call an emotional flashback, where your body responds to present stimuli based on past emotional memories. The key word is emotional. Unlike cognitive memories, which you consciously recall, "I remember my 10th birthday." Emotional memories are stored differently. They live in your body, ready to activate at the slightest similar signal. These emotional memories form what we call triggers, specific experiences that instantly connect you to unprocessed emotional wounds from your past. And here's what's fascinating. Your triggers aren't random. They're precisely calibrated to the exact wounds that still need your attention. When your partner says something that makes you feel abandoned, it's not because they're abandoning you. It's because something in their words, tone, or actions resembles an earlier experience of abandonment that your system still carries. When feelings of not being good enough flood through you after a simple criticism, it's not because their feedback was devastating. It's because it touched on an unhealed wound where you learned that your worth was tied to your performance. This is why the people closest to us tend to trigger us the most intensely. Intimacy itself becomes the container where our deepest wounds surface, because it's only in the context of vulnerability that these old patterns can fully emerge. But why can't I just let it go? You might wonder. Why do I keep reacting to things that happened so long ago? Because your body is incredibly intelligent. It continues to present these emotional patterns precisely because they haven't been fully processed. Your system isn't punishing you, it's trying to heal you by bringing these wounds to the surface where they can finally be addressed. And that's where the extraordinary opportunity lies. To truly understand your triggers, we need to go back to the beginning, to how your emotional brain developed. As children, we don't have the cognitive capacity to process complex emotional experiences. When something painful happens, whether it's overt trauma, like abuse, or more subtle wounds like emotional neglect, we can't make sense of it with our undeveloped minds. Instead, we form what psychologists call implicit beliefs, unconscious conclusions about ourselves, others, and how relationships work. I'm too much. I'm not enough. I'm only loved when I perform. People will leave if I show my true self. My needs don't matter. These beliefs become the invisible architecture of our adult relationships. They operate beneath conscious awareness but direct our emotional responses in powerful ways. Let me share Maya's story to illustrate how this works. Maya would become intensely anxious whenever her boyfriend would go out with friends. She'd check her phone compulsively, imagining worst-case scenarios, feeling an overwhelming sense of abandonment, even though he'd given her no reason to doubt him. When we explored the roots of this trigger, Maya remembered how her mother would often disappear during bouts of depression when Maya was young. There was never any explanation, just the terrifying experience of not knowing when or if her mother would emotionally return. As a child, Maya's developing brain created a protective association. When people I love are not present, I am unsafe. This wasn't a conscious thought. It was an emotional learning etched into her nervous system. 30 years later, her boyfriend's normal social life was activating this same circuit. The adult Maya knew he was just having dinner with friends. But her emotional brain was screaming, "You're being abandoned again." This is crucial to understand. In these triggered moments, you're experiencing two realities simultaneously. There's the present reality, your partner is just busy with work, and the superimposed emotional reality from your past, you're being ignored. Just like when your emotional needs didn't matter as a child. Both feel equally real. That's why logic rarely helps in these moments. Your partner might reasonably say, "But I'm just working late to finish a project, I'm not rejecting you." And while that's factually accurate, it doesn't address the emotional reality you're experiencing. In that moment, you're not just dealing with a deadline, you're reliving every time your emotional needs were dismissed as unimportant. Let's look at the most common relationship triggers and what they really reveal. When you're triggered by perceived rejection or abandonment, this often stems from early experiences where your emotional needs for connection weren't consistently met. Perhaps a parent was physically present but emotionally absent, or perhaps important figures in your life were inconsistent in their availability. Your system learned, "I can't count on others to be there when I need them." In adult relationships, this might manifest as anxiety when your partner doesn't immediately respond to texts, or as a tendency to anticipate being left even when there's no evidence it will happen. The internal dialogue might sound like, "They're pulling away. They don't really care. I knew this would happen eventually." When you're triggered by criticism or judgment, this typically connects to environments where love felt conditional on performance, or where mistakes were met with shame rather than support. Your system learned, "I'm only acceptable when I'm perfect." As an adult, even gentle feedback from your partner can activate overwhelming feelings of shame or inadequacy. What they intended as a simple request, "Could you remember to take out the trash?" gets unconsciously translated to, "You failed again. You're not good enough." When you're triggered by feeling controlled, this often traces back to childhood experiences, where your autonomy wasn't respected or where your boundaries were consistently violated. Your system learned, "My boundaries don't matter," or "I must fight to maintain my sense of self." In relationships, this might emerge as disproportionate anger when your partner makes suggestions about your choices, or as resistance to making joint decisions that feel like surrendering your independence. These patterns aren't character flaws or signs that you're too damaged for healthy love. They're intelligent adaptations your mind created to navigate difficult emotional terrain when you had far fewer resources than you have today. The question becomes, how do you begin to transform these triggers from sources of pain into opportunities for healing? It starts with compassionate awareness. When you feel triggered, try to create even the smallest space between the stimulus and your reaction. In that space, ask yourself, what am I really feeling right now? Is it truly about what just happened? Or is this feeling familiar from somewhere else in my life? What does this intense emotion remind me of? When was the first time I remember feeling this way? What did I need in that original moment that I didn't receive? One client described this process as emotional archaeology, carefully excavating the origins of our most intense reactions to understand their true source. And here's where the profound opportunity emerges. When your partner triggers you, they're not causing new pain. They're highlighting pain that already exists within you. Pain that's been waiting for your awareness and compassion. This realization completely transforms the dynamic from blame. "You're making me feel this way," to ownership. "This is my wound to heal." Jason, who would become defensive and shut down whenever his wife expressed disappointment, had a breakthrough when he recognized that his reaction wasn't about his wife at all. It was about his childhood experience of never feeling good enough for his achievement-oriented father. "For the first time," he shared, "I could see that my wife wasn't attacking me like my father did. She was just expressing a normal emotion. The overwhelming shame I felt was coming from inside me, not from her words." This shift in perspective changed everything. Instead of defending against his wife, Jason began to work with his own shame response. He learned to say, "I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. I think I'm getting triggered. Can we pause this conversation while I center myself?" Over time, as Jason continued to work with his triggers rather than from within them, something remarkable happened. The intensity of his reactions began to diminish. The shame that once felt unbearable became more manageable. And most importantly, he began to separate his wife's actual words and intentions from the painful emotional memories they had been activating. This is the extraordinary invitation your triggers extend to you. Each time you feel that overwhelming emotional response, it's an opportunity to heal not just your current relationship, but your relationship with yourself and your past. It doesn't mean the process is easy. Working with triggers requires patience, self-compassion, and often the support of a trained professional who understands trauma and attachment wounds. But with consistent attention, these same triggers that once created disconnection can become doorways to deeper intimacy, both with your partner and with the parts of yourself that have been waiting to be reclaimed. Your triggers aren't random glitches in your emotional system. They're precise messengers pointing to the exact places where healing is possible. And while they may feel overwhelming in the moment, they contain within them the map to your emotional freedom. The next time you feel triggered in your relationship, try to remember, this reaction isn't really about your partner. It's about an unhealed part of you that's asking for your compassion and understanding. Your partner isn't causing the pain, they're simply the catalyst bringing it to the surface where it can finally be addressed. This doesn't mean your partner's behavior is always appropriate. Boundaries still matter. But distinguishing between a genuine boundary violation and a triggered response changes everything about how you navigate relationship challenges. I'd love to hear in the comments about a time when you recognized your own trigger and what you discovered beneath it. And if you're finding yourself caught in these emotional patterns over and over, there's another layer we need to explore. Because sometimes what feels like love is actually emotional addiction. Watch, it's not love, it's emotional addiction. To understand why you might be confusing intense emotional chemistry with genuine connection. You're not broken. You're on a journey of reclaiming your emotional truth.